Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is going to be another Raid Shadow Legends video, and I'm excited today. We're going to be talking about Unkillable Champions. This is probably the most important champion many of you are going to have on your team, right? Because it's going to enable you to do clan boss and do it successfully. Being able to survive 50 turns means at least a 2 key damage, really. I mean, at least 3. But usually 2 key damage on Ultra Nightmare just by bringing in a few poisoners. But of course, it's a little tricky, and each champion is a little bit different in what they bring. So we're going to look at all 6 unkillable champions, because there's only 6, guys. There's only 6 champions that can actually give your entire team unkillable for an entire turn. And that's all you need. You just need to be able to do it for 1 turn, and then we can manipulate speeds, manipulate champions, to build an unkillable team around them. So we're going to go all the way from the bottom to the top. We're going to climb our way there to the mountaintop. That's our goal for today. So let's go ahead and take a look at these 6 champions. Almost forgot, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button down there in the corner. And then, of course, clicking that notification bell so you don't miss my next upload is always a great idea. And then, of course, if you're looking for clan boss teams, don't forget, visit deadwoodjedi.com and you'll see all the different tunes right there. So thankfully for me, I do have all these champions on my account. So we're just going to go through and look at them and check out the skills. And the first champion we're going to start with is going to be, I would say, easily the weakest of these unkillable champions. But we're talking about Warcaster. Warcaster is an unkillable champion with a 4-turn cooldown on his unkillable ability. And we'll go through his entire kit to really understand why this champion is still really good, even if he is the weakest of all these unkillable champions. So obviously we can start with his A1 here. Now the things we're going to want to recognize are what's good for clan boss. That's the most important thing here. So A1, 1 at single attack, steals 2 random debuffs from the target, damage based on attack. Well, okay, we can base an unkillable champion on attack. It's easy to build their attack up. That's not too hard. This is something we can utilize for sure, but stealing random buffs is not really something that's going to be super advantageous to us. We're unkillable. We don't necessarily need to steal the buffs from the clan boss. A little increased attack doesn't hurt, but hopefully we're bringing that into the team anyway. The A2 ability here places a block buffs debuff. So this is definitely something that we don't want. And so we definitely would either want to turn the skill off or make sure we do not build accuracy on this champion, because that's just going to clutter up the debuffs we could put up there. And then his A3 is going to be the block damage buff, of course. It's on all allies for 1 turn. When it's booked, it goes down to a 4-turn cooldown. The big question, when you're booking this champion, how many books do you need? You just need the 2 to get this skill, this unkillable ability, this block damage ability down to a 4-turn cooldown. That's literally all you're going to need. Once you do that, you're in good shape. Now, the hard part, of course, with Warcaster is it's only a 1-turn block damage ability, and it's on a 4-turn cooldown. That's very hard to utilize. In fact, there's only one team that can really utilize Warcaster, one Warcaster by himself, to make you unkillable. And I'm talking about the Dark Knight comp. And that's a comp where basically we're using Renegade to reset Warcaster's ability and allow him to block the damage for the AoEs. That's a great skill. It's a great ability. Gotta love it. But what it does mean is it means that you're going to have to bring in somebody else to take the stun. That means either tanking it with somebody, bringing in someone with an unkillable ability for a single turn. So typically we're talking about champions like I think we're talking about Skull Crusher primarily is one that we really like to go with. You know, champions like Bushy, you know, champions with the revive ability can be good for that as well, but generally it's a little bit tougher, right? There's not a lot of options with that. Plus you have to go really fast. But where Warcaster is really good is he's really good paired with another unkillable champion. You can pair Warcaster with one of the other 4-turn cooldown block damage champions or unkillable champions and have them alternate block damage. If you can go on a 2-1 ratio where one blocks the damage for your entire team on 1 turn and then the other guy does it on the other one, in that case Warcaster can be really, really useful. Also, Warcaster hits decently hard. Not a great damage dealer, but he's not a wet noodle either, so he's not a bad choice to bring around. Now, of course, he does have an aura as well, and this aura is pretty decent, right? Increases void ally crit rate in all battles by 23%. Anytime you can bump the crit rate or the speed of your champions, that's a really good aura to have because it makes building your champions that much easier. So definitely something to look forward to. Warcaster's a good champion. Not a great one, though, and easily the weakest out of these 6. Warcaster's a little bit of the outlier, the black sheep of the family, so to speak. The rest of these champions are all very viable, unkillable champions for your clan boss teams. And this next one is probably going to be the weakest of this group. Number 5 on our list is Sir Nicholas, Santa himself. Now, I know a lot of you are going, wait a minute, Santa's great. Santa is great. He's an amazing champion. Hits really hard too, which is really nice. But there are some issues when it comes to bringing him into clan boss. Now, one of the reasons why I would probably rate Sir Nicholas as a better champion than some of the other champions on this list is because he is more usable in other areas of the game, right? He hits really hard. He gives you a shield. He gives you healing. But the thing is, for clan boss, what he brings is much more difficult to be able to fully utilize on your team. So let's talk about his kit, and you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about here. So obviously the A1 skill, HP based. All of his skills are HP based, which means building him for damage becomes a lot easier. Once you have one skill to focus on, that does help a lot. A1 single hit, with a freeze. Doesn't matter. It's not going to help us for clan boss. Can't freeze a clan boss. So it's just a damage dealing skill. It does good damage though, so it's not a bad one to use. His A2 ability attacks all enemies, places a shield buff on all allies for 2 turns, and the value of the shield is equal to 30% of the damage inflicted. Now, for clan boss, I would actually recommend turning this skill off. I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe the A1 actually hits a little bit harder. Definitely something you can test out, and it takes one run to really see, but I think the A1 actually hits harder. And that shield, you don't want to mess up any of your stun targeting. I don't think it would, but it's not going to be a very large shield because he's only attacking the clan boss. So there's a limited amount of damage, a limited size shield he's going to put on. It's definitely not something I would generally recommend utilizing. The other hard part about Sir Nicholas is this is actually the skill he prioritizes. So I'll get back to that in a minute. And then his A3 ability here is his unkillable ability. And this one is an unkillable buff, 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now, just like Warcaster, you only need 2 books to get this down to a 4-turn cooldown. If you can do that, that's all you need. Now, with all these champions, I should say, Warcaster, Sir Nicholas, and the other 4 we're going to be talking about, it's going to be helpful just to prioritize their unkillable ability. You don't want to get into the situation where they're not using their skills because their AI is bad. And this is the thing about Sir Nicholas. He was a terrible unkillable champion for clan boss because his AI was absolutely awful. I mean, I made a team that could utilize him on auto using Painkeeper and stuff. It's a cool comp. I think it's called the North Pole on the website. But we don't have to worry about that anymore because now we can prioritize our skills, right? So we can prioritize this A3 ability. Before, what was happening is that A2, which was on a 3-turn cooldown, was the prioritized skill. And that's a huge issue because that 3-turn priority will override the 4-turn and you won't ever get a regular usage of his skills. Now we can prioritize the A3, and that makes everything so much easier. Now, the good thing about Sir Nicholas, everything's HP based, right? So you build one skill and you can get good damage out of him. The hard part is his block damage skill is really an unkillable skill. So you are going to lose damage. On top of that, that skill gives you a continuous heal. Now, this can be useful if timed correctly because you do need a certain amount of HP when unkillable for the clan boss to see you as a valid target. But what it does do, especially because he's an HP based champion, is it makes it actually really, really hard to get the stun targeting right. And that can be really difficult because much like any of the other block damage champions on a 4-turn cooldown, it's very difficult to be able to just use one of these champions and stay unkillable. Almost always you have to bring in somebody else to the table. That means you're going to need a Warcaster to pair with Sir Nicholas. That works great. Or you're going to need somebody like a Skull Crusher to pair with Sir Nicholas, or like a Taurus. Someone else that has an individual skill that gives them unkillable ability. Or you have to come with some weird comp that doesn't work for all the difficulties where you have one person rolling slow and it just stays on them. It can be really tough. And the continuous heal, along with the shield, along with the fact he's an HP-based champion, can make it really, really hard to avoid Sir Nicholas taking the stun. And so that's one of the reasons why he's a little bit lower on this list. Amazing champion everywhere else. Great for spiders, great for dungeons, even really good for arena, but he's not going to be great for clan boss. But if you can pair him with another unkillable champion on a 4-turn cooldown, you can get some of the best teams out there, like the Batman Forever, any Tower Sir Nick team works, any Warcaster Sir Nick team works. You could even do a Sir Nick and Demytha team. There's plenty of abilities and plenty of different options as far as building unkillable teams with Sir Nicholas, as long as you can bring in somebody else with him. And then that brings us to our 4th champion, another block damage champion on a 4-turn cooldown. You're sensing a pattern here. We're talking about Roschard the Tower. And Roschard is absolutely fantastic as a champion. He is one of the better unkillable champions, and part of the reason is he actually blocks the damage. And it's really nice being able to do that because it makes stun targeting a whole lot easier when nobody's taking damage for those AoE hits. On top of that, it is a 2-turn duration. So let's look at the skills and we can break down exactly why he's good. Okay, I get it. Maintenance coming up. And I can see how this works. Okay, so A1 ability, right, has a chance to remove a random buff. It's an attack-based skill. Remember that. Now, this is, obviously, we talked about this before. Removing a buff is not really crucial when you're building an unkillable team. So it's not really the best skill in the world. We don't necessarily need accuracy to be able to utilize this. His A2 ability places a block active skill, won't work on clan boss, and a block buff skill, another debuff that we don't want. 1-turn attack, right? So we don't want either of those things. Now these debuffs cannot be resisted, which means we're going to be putting the block buffs debuff on the clan boss. The best thing you can do with Tower is actually turn this skill off. We don't need it. You'll notice this one's damage is based off of HP. It's a lot harder to build an HP damage dealer than an attack damage dealer, so it's much better just to turn this off, focus on the A1, and just get attack built on your Roschard. And then we come to the A3 skill, which is a block damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. And obviously 2 books cools this down to a 4-turn cooldown. We talked about this already. The only books you need are the ones that are going to reduce the cooldown on his block damage or unkillable ability. So those are the only ones you need. Obviously, you can't pick where they go, but if you get lucky, that's all you have to do, which makes these champions really, really valuable for us. Now, this is on a 4-turn cooldown, right? And so again, because we have a 4-turn cooldown, it becomes a little bit tricky to make an unkillable team. So let's think about this. The clan boss has 3 different skills, right? AoE 1, AoE 2, and the stun. Well, we want to make sure we're blocking damage on everybody for AoE 1 and AoE 2. For the stun, we can just have one champion be unkillable for that, right? This is where Skull Crusher kind of comes into a lot of these comps. So when it comes to Roschard and timing his skills out, what we really need to do is just put him on a 4-3 ratio. Because it's a 4-turn cooldown, we need him to take an extra turn somewhere in those 3 attacks the clan boss takes, right? That's why the 4-3 ratio. And so because of that, a lot of times with his builds, he's going first and then last before that first AoE, so he can put up that block damage. Everybody's covered. The second AoE, everybody takes their turn, and then the second AoE goes, he's still blocking the damage, and then we just have to deal with the stun. Really good champion for this. But because it's a 4-turn cooldown, it gets harder the faster we go. The one thing we can do is, just like Sir Nicholas and Warcaster, which is why all 3 of these champions tend to work in concert, and why you can substitute Sir Nicholas for almost any Tower comp and Tower for almost any Sir Nicholas comp, is because if you take 2 of those 3 champions and put them together, you can run them at a 2-1 ratio and stay unkillable. Now, obviously, Warcaster is a 1-turn duration, whereas Tower and Sir Nicholas are 2 turns, so Warcaster would have to go last in the turn order, so it stays up on everybody. And then Tower and Sir Nick can do it a little bit earlier in the run, in the turn order. But the idea is that he's really good because of that block damage ability, because you can build a little bit of damage on him with the attack. He's not the best damage dealer, but he's probably the easiest of these 3 unkillable champions to make work. It's a 2-turn duration. It's block damage, not unkillable. Those are things that really make building the teams a lot easier. And then we get to the top 3, and these 3 champions are easily the best 3 options that you have for clan boss if you're trying to build an unkillable team. And I think it's very easy to argue that any one of them could be the best. And I might ruffle a little feathers with how I'm actually ordering this, but let's just jump in. We're going to start with number 3 here, and I think it's going to be Demytha. This is one of my favorite champions. She does so much to help you build unkillable teams, But the hard part is it is only 1 turn duration, and that means that you're kind of stuck with some specific teams, some specific setups, but she's amazing at enabling a lot of different varieties of teams. This is one of the reasons why I absolutely love this champion. So let's look at her kit and get an understanding of exactly why she's so good. Now, with her A1 ability here, this is her only attack skill, and this is part of the problem with her. She just does not do any damage because she only has 1 attack out of her 3 skills, and this is going to be a single attack. It's a 2-hit attack, but it places a shield buff for 2 turns on the ally with the lowest HP. So she's putting a shield buff on one champion. That's not really helpful for us because it is so low, and it's an attack-based skill, so it's not really going to synergize there as well. We're going to ignore that for now. Her A2 ability increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn, then decreases the duration of all ally debuffs by 1 turn. Also gives you a very large heal. Now, this is a skill that is amazing for things like Hydra, but for Clan Boss, it's also really, really good. First off, the heal can be really nice, right? That's definitely something that can be helpful for you. But in Clan Boss, when you're building Unkillable teams, it's not really, something that's that pertinent, I should say. What is really pertinent is that increase of the duration of ally buffs. That is massive. Being able to stretch out your buffs is huge. This is why we're able to build these incredibly fast teams like the Myth Air team at relatively low speeds, because she's actually extending the duration of the speed buff from our speed champions, which is insane. And then on top of that, she's able to decrease the duration of the debuffs. That means that you can actually have her cleanse the stun, which is just provides a little bit extra utility that is really nice for some particular teams. She's a really, really good champion. Not perfect by any means, but really good. That skill especially is what takes her above the other champions so far on the list. And then her A3, of course, block damage buff on all allies for 1 turn and a continuous heal buff. Now, the continuous heal isn't really going to be helpful, right? We're blocking damage. This is great for other content, right? Hydra, dungeons, all that kind of stuff. But for Clan Boss, really, it's that block damage. And the key to her is on a 3-turn cooldown. That's massive. Now, again, 2 books to get this down to that 3-turn cooldown. The hard part with Demytha, you are going to want to fully book her, at least her A3 and her A2. And the reason why I say that is the A2 you want down to a 3-turn cooldown as well. Remember, we were talking about the Clan Boss 3 attacks, right? AoE 1, 2, and the stun. Well, having your skills line up with that makes building teams so much easier. This is why with those Myth Air teams, we have her going on a 3-1 ratio, so she's able to block the damage every single turn, right? With some teams like the Myth Tower team, you have Tower blocking the AoEs and Myth just blocking the stun, and that's a great way to go about doing this. There's a lot of different varieties with this. Even with the double Demytha team, you have 2 Demythas going on a 3-2 ratio. So basically, they're going 2 turns, then 1 turn, 2 turns, then 1 turn, alternating when they're going to place that block damage ability and keeping your team alive for the entirety of the fight. It's a really good skill, really good ability, and she's just a great champion. So definitely somebody I would really build if you have her. And then we get to number 2 on the list, and this is a classic, a mainstay for most of our Clan Boss teams that people run out there. We're talking, of course, about Maneater. Maneater is absolutely bonkers because he does 2 incredibly valuable things at the same time, and we've had some really smart people in this community help build some really smart teams. So let's look at his kit here. Obviously, his A1 is a decreased attack. Now, this is something we definitely want to not put on the Clan Boss. When we're going unkillable, we don't need to worry about the attack from the Clan Boss, so we do not build accuracy on our Maneaters. The A2 ability here is a full depletion of the enemy's turn meter. Again, this doesn't affect the Clan Boss. Quick note, back in the day, it actually used to fill up Maneater's turn meter. Didn't reduce the Clan Bosses, but filled his up. They fixed that bug, but man, I enjoyed that when I had him. Anyway, but basically this is just a damage skill here, right? We're not doing anything else. When it comes to Maneater, the only skill we need to worry about is his A3, Ancient Blood. And this is because it's an unkillable buff for 2 turns and a block debuff for 2 turns on all allies. So this is incredibly good, an incredibly good skill where he's going to stay unkillable and keep everybody affinity friendly. This is why it is such a good champion. And the best part is a lot of the teams involving him are not that difficult to build. Some of the best teams in this game, Bat Eater, Batman Forever, all those kind of squads where you're using 2 Maneaters and a Painkeeper, running at a 2-1 ratio and staying unkillable are insane. Bat Salad Eater's another great one where you have two of them running at a 5-2 ratio, basically alternating turns of when they're going to stay unkillable. Really smart. Then we have, one of the classics, I think, maybe the most used team, the Budget Unkillable with Maneater, and basically just Maneater and Painkeeper, and you're running someone so slow that Maneater's able to keep them alive. It's a kind of an insane type of team. Really, really good. And because of that block debuff ability, you don't have to worry about bringing in a cleanser or another block debuff champion. And that just allows you to focus on the damage you want to bring in. And then, of course, my favorite team involving Maneater, which I think is one of the best teams that you can build, especially as you're coming up into the game, if you can't do one key damage, is the double Maneater. It's super easy. The speeds are incredibly low. It works for Nightmare, Ultra Nightmare, and Brutal without having to change anything. And it is incredibly, incredibly good because you're going to block all the debuffs with those Maneaters. That means you don't have to worry about cleansing. You don't have to worry about healing. You don't have to worry about blocking debuffs from anybody else. You can just bring in 3 damage dealers and let them go to town, which is what it's about. So Maneater is an incredibly strong champion for Clan Boss. Now, the hard part is that Ancient Blood skill is on a 5-turn cooldown. That's a really long cooldown, and so it makes it a little bit tricky sometimes to build teams around it. We've already uncovered a bunch of them, so there are good teams out there, and they're so easy to build. This is one of the reasons why he's high on the list. Now, the other part about Maneater is he's probably one of the best damage dealers out of this group. Outside of the top champion I'm about to name, he's probably the best damage dealer out there, maybe with the exception of Sir Nicholas, but he can really stack it on. So you build his attack up, and you can get some extra damage out of him as well, and that's a really good way to up your numbers overall. And then, of course, we get to the number 1 champion, the Fusion champion, the new guy on the block. I'm talking about Helicath, the Hellcat himself. This dude is outstanding, and I really don't have any reservations about putting him number 1 on this list. I mean, I don't know that we're going to get the same kind of teams that we're going to get from a Maneater or from Demytha using Helicath, but one of the great things about him is because he can keep your entire team unkillable essentially by himself, it allows, again, one more spot for a damage dealing champion to come in, and I think that is phenomenal. So let's look at his skills. Of course, we got that A1 with a weaken debuff. This is great. Not only is he giving you block damage and unkillable ability, but he's actually giving you a debuff you can use. That's massive. That means you don't have to worry about bringing in a weakened champion. You just bring in a decreased defense and you're good to go. His A2 ability, right? Shield buff on all allies. And this is so large. This is what I've been using in every one of my videos to block the stun. It's what makes him so unique from any of the other block damage champions, is basically he's giving you an extra turn of being unkillable. And that's massive. That's just massive to be able to do that, because if you can have one champion keep you unkillable, it makes building teams so much easier, right? So really, really strong champion there. Then, of course, we have his A3 ability, places a block damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. And whenever a block damage buff is placed, it's expired, we'll place an increased defense buff on that ally. So this is a great champion because when that block damage expires, he does give him increased defense as well as everybody else, which can coincide really well with the rest of his kit. And he's a defensive based champion, so we're only getting more damage out of him. Really, really strong. I'm just a big fan of him. He also has some good passives, right? Increases his defense by 5% for every champion under a block damage buff. This works really well with that A2, the shield based off of defense, right? Counterattacks whenever he's hit while under block damage. This works perfectly for many of the unkillable teams that we have with Hellcat. If any of the basic ones that we utilize him with, the fast Hellcat, the supercharged, whatever, he's going to still get his counterattacks in, even if your counterattacker isn't giving him the buff. That's massive for keeping our damage up. On top of all that, he still has enough fantastic aura, right, for all battles, but he does good damage. He does insanely good damage. This was a reason why I think this is one of the best unkillable champions, actually the best unkillable champion we have out there. You are going to be able to one key with him in an unkillable team by himself. That's phenomenal and kind of unique, right? You don't get that very often. So definitely somebody that I hope you all fuse. I know everybody knows how good he's going to be, but the best part about him and the teams you can build with him is they're easy because you only need him. In fact, he's one of those, I think the only champion I can think of where running a slower team makes more sense than running a faster team, simply because of the fact that you're able to keep more damage dealers in your squad running him slower, and the teams don't take as long. So instead of running a 30-minute clan boss fight, you're running a 10-minute one, and you're getting the same kind of result out of it. So Helicath's fantastic. I'm actually really excited to build him for my main team, my main account, and just see if I can't change my clan boss team to something that's a little bit more comfortable for me to run on a daily basis. So those are the champions. So there's 6 unkillable champions, right? Talking Helicath, Maneater, Demytha, Tower, Sir Nicholas, and Warcaster. Phenomenal champions. And, you'll notice the reason why Helicath's at that top, him and Maneater, they both do damage. That's what it comes down to. Demytha gives you all that utility. Same thing with Maneater. Same thing with Helicath, right? And the thing that separates those 3 from the other 3 is you can really run unkillable teams with just them. You don't really need anybody else involved. The Maneater a little bit, right? You do kind of need a Painkeeper half the time to run it with him, but he brings extra support in his kit and he deals damage too. So just a lot of utility with these champions. So you can kind of see the pattern here. These are the things that I'm looking for in my champions, and that's why I think these are the best. So that's what we got for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. It's kind of a fun little tier list video we got for you today. So yeah, till next we meet. Oh, and don't forget, subscribe, hit that notification button, guys. Until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.